Have you ever been told by your own parent that your life doesn't count just because it doesn't look like theirs? What would you do if your family decided your time, your boundaries, and your mental health meant absolutely nothing, especially during the holidays? And here's the real question. Backhand index pointing right, is family still family when they use love as a weapon? Backhand index pointing right, would you have stayed silent, or done what I did? Tell me honestly in the comments, because what happened to me over Christmas changed everything. I never imagined that the same holiday meant for peace, warmth, and connection would turn into the most exhausting, eye-opening experience of my entire life. And it all started with one sentence my mom said so casually, as if it meant nothing. You don't have a real life anyway. 1. You have no real life. I'm 27 years old. I live alone. I pay my own bills. I work remotely, which apparently means, according to my family, that I do nothing all day. To them, because I don't clock in at a physical office, because I don't have kids screaming in the background, and because I don't live the same chaotic life they chose, my life somehow doesn't qualify as real. My mom has always believed that struggle equals value. If you're tired, overwhelmed, or constantly sacrificing yourself, then congratulations, you're living correctly. But if you've built a peaceful routine, protected your mental health, and chosen a different path, then clearly, something must be wrong with you. Christmas was supposed to be simple this year. I planned to spend it quietly, working a little, relaxing, maybe binge-watching shows, cooking something nice for myself. I hadn't even told anyone my plans because every time I do, someone finds a way to hijack them. And that's exactly what happened. 3 days before Christmas, my mom called. Not asked. Called, with instructions. She said my sister and her husband were overwhelmed. 6 kids. Ages ranging from toddler to preteen. Christmas break. No babysitter. And then came the sentence that still echoes in my head. You don't have a real life anyway. You're free. You'll watch the kids. No question mark. No pause. No option to say no. I tried to explain, calmly, that I had work deadlines. That I needed rest. That I wasn't mentally prepared to take care of 6 children for days. She laughed. Actually laughed. Work? On a laptop? That's not real work. That's when I realized something painful. To her, my time wasn't mine. Because I didn't live like her, she felt entitled to my life. I felt that familiar pressure, the one I've felt since childhood. The guilt. The obligation. The fear of being labeled selfish. And like I always do, I gave in. I arrived at my sister's house Christmas Eve. Chaos doesn't even begin to describe it. Toys everywhere. Kids yelling. TVs blasting different shows in different rooms. Sticky floors. Crying. Fighting. And the constant background noise of adults pretending this was all a blessing. The moment I walked in, my sister smiled in relief. Not happiness. Relief. She handed me a diaper bag and said, "Thank God you're here." That's when it hit me. I wasn't a guest. I was hired help, without pay, without consent. Within an hour, I was feeding kids, cleaning spills, breaking up arguments, and listening to complaints about how hard parenting is. No one asked if I was okay. No one asked if I needed a break. No one even said thank you. That night, while everyone else drank wine and laughed, I sat on the floor assembling toys and wondering how I let this happen again. And deep down, something inside me started to crack. Have you ever been forced into responsibility just because you're the available one? Do people in your family treat your time like it's worthless? Comment yes if this feels familiar. By the second day, the exhaustion was physical and emotional. I hadn't slept properly. I hadn't eaten properly. And I definitely hadn't worked. One of the kids spilled juice all over my laptop. When I reacted, just a little, my sister snapped at me. "You're overreacting. They're just kids." But when her phone cracked earlier that day, she screamed. That's when I realized the truth. My boundaries didn't matter because I'd never enforced them. And Christmas was about to teach me the hardest lesson of all. I never thought Christmas would be the moment my family finally made it clear how little my life meant to them. For most people, Christmas is about warmth, peace, and feeling like you belong somewhere. For me, it became the holiday where I realized that no matter how old I got, no matter how independent I became, my family would always see me as the extra person, the one whose time didn't matter. It started with a phone call from my mom, 3 days before Christmas. Her tone was normal. Too normal. That's how she always did it. No warning, no softness, just straight into business, like she was calling an employee instead of her own child. She told me my sister was overwhelmed. 6 kids. Christmas break. No school. No babysitter. And apparently, no other option. Before I could even respond, she dropped the sentence that hit harder than she probably realized. You don't have a real life anyway. There was a pause on my end of the call. Not because I didn't hear her, but because I couldn't believe she actually said it out loud. So casually. Like it was a fact everyone already agreed on. I asked her what she meant. She sighed, annoyed, as if I was being dramatic. You work from home. You don't have kids. You're always on that laptop. You're free. You can help. Help? That word always sounds harmless until you realize it means sacrifice yourself quietly so others don't have to. I tried to explain. I really did. I told her I had deadlines. That I'd been stressed. That I needed rest. That Christmas was the one time I planned to slow down. She laughed. Not nervously. Not awkwardly. She laughed like my words were a joke. Deadlines? She said. On a computer? That's not real work. Try raising kids. That's real life. And there it was. The unspoken rule in my family, if you didn't choose the same hard path they did, your life didn't count. I felt that old familiar guilt creep in. The kind that sits heavy in your chest and tells you that saying no makes you a bad person. A selfish one. An ungrateful one. I wanted to say no. I should have said no. But years of conditioning kicked in before logic could. So I said yes. By the time I hung up the phone, I already felt exhausted, and Christmas hadn't even started yet. When I arrived at my sister's house on Christmas Eve, the chaos hit me immediately. The door barely opened before a kid ran into me. Someone was crying in the living room. Another was yelling from upstairs. Toys were scattered everywhere like landmines. The TV was blasting cartoons at full volume, competing with the sound of arguments and clattering dishes. The house didn't feel festive. It felt overwhelmed. My sister looked at me like someone spotting water after being stranded in the desert. She smiled, not because she was happy to see me, but because she was relieved. Thank God you're here, she said. And just like that, she handed me a diaper bag. No hug. No, how are you? No thanks for coming. In that moment, it became painfully clear. I wasn't a guest. I was backup labor. Within the first hour, I was already deep into it. Changing diapers. Breaking up fights. Cleaning spills. Helping with homework. Making snacks. Repeating the same sentence, be careful, over and over again until it lost all meaning. Meanwhile, the adults sat around talking, laughing, drinking coffee, and complaining about how hard parenting is. Every complaint felt like a slap. Because somehow, they could complain endlessly, but I wasn't allowed to be tired at all. When one of the kids spilled juice all over the floor and it splashed onto my laptop bag, I reacted instinctively. I raised my voice. Just a little. Not yelling. Just frustration slipping through. My sister immediately snapped. They're just kids. Calm down. I swallowed my response. But later that same day, when her phone slipped off the counter and the screen cracked, she lost it. Full meltdown. Swearing. Blaming everyone around her. No one told her to calm down. No one said, it's just a phone. That's when something shifted inside me. It wasn't about the kids. It was about respect. Or rather, the complete lack of it. That night, while everyone else relaxed, I sat on the floor assembling toys at midnight because it would make Christmas morning easier. My back hurt. My eyes burned. My head throbbed. No one noticed. No one asked if I was okay. No one offered to take over. I realized that as long as I stayed quiet, they'd keep taking. And taking. And taking. Because to them, my exhaustion wasn't real. Just like my job wasn't real. Just like my life wasn't real. I lay awake that night on a couch that was too small, listening to kids cry in their sleep and adults snore comfortably, and I stared at the ceiling with one thought looping in my head. How did I let this become my role? Christmas Day hadn't even arrived yet. And already, something inside me was breaking. Christmas Day broke me. I woke up on Christmas morning to screaming. Not joyful screaming. Not excited, Santa came. Screaming. Full-on chaos. Two kids were fighting over a toy that hadn't even been opened properly yet. Another was crying because their sibling touched their presents. Someone spilled milk on the couch. Someone else was yelling for their mom, who was still asleep. I checked my phone. 6:12 a.m. I hadn't even slept 4 hours. Before I could fully sit up, my sister yelled my name from the kitchen. Can you come help for a second? A second? That word had already lost all meaning. I got up, my body aching, my head heavy, and walked into the kitchen where she immediately handed me a plate of waffles and said, "Feed them. I need coffee." And just like that, Christmas morning officially became my responsibility. The kids were wired. Sugar, excitement, no routine. They talked over each other, yelled, demanded things all at once. One wanted more syrup. One didn't like their waffle. One wanted juice but not that cup. One started crying because someone else looked at them the wrong way. I tried to stay calm. I really did. I reminded myself they were kids. That this wasn't their fault. That I just had to get through the day. But what made it unbearable wasn't the kids. It was the adults. They floated in and out of the room, smiling for photos, sipping coffee, joking about how crazy the morning was, while leaving me in the middle of it. At one point, my mom walked in, looked around at the mess, and laughed. "See?" she said. "This is real life." Something about that sentence made my stomach drop. Because what she really meant was, this is the life that matters. Later that morning, while everyone gathered around the tree, I stood behind the camera taking photos. Someone had to make sure the moment was captured, apparently. Get one with all the kids. No, take another. Make sure you get the grandparents. No one took one of me. When presents were opened, the kids ripped through wrapping paper like it was a competition. Toys were everywhere. Instructions ignored. Batteries missing. Guess who was sent to assemble everything? Me. While everyone else sat on the couch watching, I knelt on the floor surrounded by plastic parts, tiny screws, and screaming children demanding their toys right now. My hands started shaking. Not from anger. From exhaustion. At one point, I stood up to stretch my back and accidentally knocked over a box. A kid immediately started crying like it was the end of the world. Before I could even apologize, my sister snapped. "Can you be more careful? You're stressing them out." That was it. Not the worst thing said. Not the loudest. But it was the moment I realized something important. No matter how much I did, it would never be enough. Because in their eyes, I wasn't helping, I was supposed to. Around midday, I tried to step away. Just 10 minutes. I went to sit in the guest room, closed the door, and finally took a deep breath. It lasted exactly 3 minutes. My mom knocked, then opened the door without waiting. "What are you doing?" she asked. "I just need a break," I said quietly. She frowned. "A break from what? You don't even have kids." There it was again. That sentence. Like a punch to the chest. I wanted to scream. To list everything I'd done since arriving. To explain that being child-free didn't mean being tireless. That working from home didn't mean being available 24/7. That my mental health mattered too. But instead, I did what I always do. I swallowed it. And I went back out there. Dinner was worse. 6 kids hyped on sugar and 0 naps. Food everywhere. Arguments over chairs, forks, portions. Someone spilled gravy. Someone else refused to eat. Another kid started throwing food. I tried to help clean up, but no matter how fast I moved, it felt like the mess doubled. At one point, one of the kids shoved another and they hit their head on the table. Instant panic. Crying. Screaming. Blame flying everywhere. And somehow, my sister looked at me and said, "Why weren't you watching them?" I froze. I had been watching them. All day. Every day. But in that moment, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just the help anymore. I was the scapegoat. If anything went wrong, it was on me. That night, after the kids finally went to bed, the adults sat around laughing, drinking, and talking about how nice Christmas turned out. My mom looked at me and smiled. "See? You survived. It wasn't that bad." That's when something inside me finally snapped. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But completely. I realized I didn't feel loved. I felt used. And worse, I realized they didn't even notice. As I lay down that night, my body aching in places I didn't know could hurt, one thought kept repeating in my head. If I don't draw a line soon, this will be my life forever. Christmas was supposed to bring people together. Instead, it showed me exactly where I stood. 3. When I finally spoke up. The morning after Christmas felt heavier than the day before. Not because the house was quieter, but because I knew something had changed inside me, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. My body hurt in a way that sleep couldn't fix. My head felt foggy. My chest felt tight, like I'd been holding my breath for days and forgot how to let it go. I went into the kitchen early, hoping for just a few minutes alone. No kids. No noise. No demands. Just silence. I made myself coffee and leaned against the counter, staring out the window, thinking about how ridiculous it was that I felt guilty for wanting peace. That's when my mom walked in. She looked rested. Calm. Almost cheerful. "Morning," she said. I nodded. She poured herself coffee, then glanced at me and said casually, "So, you'll stay another couple of days, right? Your sister really needs you." Something in me went cold. She didn't ask. She assumed. I took a breath. A deep one. "I can't," I said. The word felt strange coming out of my mouth. Heavy. Dangerous. My mom paused mid-sip and looked at me like I'd just spoken another language. "What do you mean you can't?" "I mean, I'm exhausted. I need to go home. I have work. I need rest." Her expression changed instantly. The warmth disappeared. The disappointment came next. "You're being dramatic," she said. "It's just a few kids." Just a few kids. I felt my hands start to shake, but this time I didn't swallow it. "I've been taking care of them nonstop," I said. "I haven't had a break. I haven't worked. I haven't slept properly." She sighed loudly, like I was inconveniencing her. "You chose not to have kids," she replied. "That doesn't mean you get to avoid responsibility." That sentence hit harder than any insult. Because suddenly, my entire life choice was on trial. "I didn't choose this responsibility either," I said quietly. That's when my sister entered the kitchen. And everything escalated. "What's going on?" she asked. Before I could answer, my mom spoke for me. "They're saying they're too tired to help anymore." My sister laughed. Actually laughed. "You're tired?" she said. "Try being a parent." Something inside me snapped. "I'm not saying parenting isn't hard," I said, my voice shaking now. "I'm saying you dumped everything on me without asking." Her smile faded. "Well, you didn't say no." There it was. The truth. They weren't mad that I was tired. They were mad that I finally noticed. I felt my throat tighten. "I didn't feel like I could," I said. "Every time I try to set a boundary, I get told my life isn't real." The room went silent. For a split second, I thought, maybe now they'll understand. They didn't. My mom crossed her arms. "Because it isn't," she said bluntly. "Not compared to this." She gestured around the house. 6 kids. Mess. Noise. Chaos. "This is real life," she continued. "Sacrifice. Family. Responsibility." I stared at her, stunned. "So my life only matters if I'm exhausted?" I asked. "If I'm miserable?" She looked offended. "That's not what I said." "But it's what you mean," I replied. My sister scoffed. "You sound selfish." That word. Selfish. It's always the word they use when you stop giving. I felt tears burn my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "I helped because I care," I said. "But you didn't even treat me like a person. I was invisible unless you needed something." My sister shook her head. "You're overthinking it. You're too sensitive." Classic. Minimize. Dismiss. Gaslight. I suddenly understood something crystal clear. They weren't confused. They just didn't care. To them, my role was convenient. And me speaking up threatened that. My mom softened her tone, but it was the fake softness. The manipulative one. "We're family," she said. "Family helps each other without keeping score." I laughed. Bitterly. Then why am I the only one keeping track of how tired I am? No one answered. Because they didn't have one. I walked out of the kitchen, heart pounding, hands shaking, feeling like I'd just crossed a line I wasn't allowed to cross. For the rest of the day, the atmosphere was thick. No yelling. No apologies either. Just passive-aggressive comments. Oh, don't ask them, they're tired. Must be nice to leave whenever you want. Some people don't understand real responsibility. Every comment chipped away at me. By evening, I went to pack my bag. My sister stood in the doorway. You're really leaving? She asked. Yes, I said. She shook her head. I didn't think you were like this. Like what? Someone who finally chose themselves? I zipped my bag and looked at her. I didn't think I had to disappear for you to be comfortable. She didn't respond. As I walked to the door, my mom called after me. You'll regret this. I paused. For the first time in my life, I didn't turn around. I already regret staying silent for so long, I said. And then I left. Driving away, my hands were still shaking, but my chest felt lighter. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt awake. 4. The backlash I didn't expect. The drive home felt unreal. The road was familiar, but my thoughts weren't. My hands were still gripping the steering wheel too tightly, like my body didn't trust that I was actually allowed to leave. Part of me expected my phone to ring before I even reached the end of the street. It didn't. And somehow, that silence felt louder than yelling. When I got home, I dropped my bag by the door and just stood there. My apartment was quiet. Too quiet. No crying. No shouting. No constant demands. For the first time in days, I could hear my own thoughts. I should have felt relief. Instead, guilt rushed in. That's how deep it was rooted in me, the idea that choosing myself automatically meant hurting everyone else. I hadn't even unpacked when my phone buzzed. A message from my sister. The kids are crying. They don't understand why you left. I stared at the screen. No, are you okay? No, thanks for helping. No acknowledgement of anything I'd done. Just blame. I didn't respond. A minute later, another message came in. Mom is really upset. Then another. I hope you're happy. My chest tightened. This was the part they never saw, the aftermath. The emotional hangover of finally saying no. I sat on my couch, phone in my hand, feeling like the worst person in the world for needing rest. Then the calls started. First my mom. I let it ring. Then again. And again. Finally, I answered. What? I asked, my voice flat. Her voice was sharp. How could you just leave like that? I told you why, I said. You embarrassed us, she snapped. You made it seem like we were using you. I laughed softly, not because it was funny, but because it was painfully accurate. You were using me, I said. Silence. Then anger. We are family, she said. Families don't walk out when things get hard. That's not what I did, I replied. I walked out when I was being ignored. She scoffed. You always make everything about you. There it was again. The narrative. Any attempt to protect myself became selfishness in their eyes. You don't understand what it's like to be needed, she continued. Those kids depend on us. And you decided I would too, I said. Without asking. She sighed dramatically. So now what? You just abandon everyone? That word, abandon. It hit something deep. I didn't abandon anyone, I said quietly. I stopped abandoning myself. She hung up. Just like that. No goodbye. No resolution. I stared at my phone, my heart racing, my hands trembling. And then something unexpected happened. My phone buzzed again. But this time, it wasn't my mom. It was my aunt. The one person in the family who usually stays neutral. Are you okay? That question almost broke me. I called her immediately. She listened as I explained everything. The pressure. The comments. The exhaustion. The way my life was constantly dismissed. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something I didn't expect. I'm glad you left. I froze. What? She sighed. I saw how much they put on you, she said. They've been doing it for years. You just finally stopped accepting it. Tears streamed down my face. Not because I was sad. but because someone finally saw me. She continued, "Your mom has always believed suffering equals love. But that doesn't mean you have to live that way." That conversation changed something in me. For the first time, I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a pattern. And patterns don't change unless someone breaks them. That night, my sister posted pictures on social media. Smiling family photos. Kids laughing. Captioned, "Family is everything." I stared at my screen, feeling sick. Because behind those photos was the truth. The exhaustion. The pressure. The way I was erased once I stopped being useful. And that's when I understood something important. They weren't angry because I left. They were angry because I proved I could. 5. The truth I was never meant to know. The next morning, I woke up feeling strange. Not calm. Not anxious. Clear. For the first time since Christmas started, my mind wasn't racing. It was like something heavy had finally been put down, and now I could see everything clearly. I made coffee and sat by the window, watching people walk by, living their own lives without permission from anyone else. That's when I realized something painful. I had spent my entire life waiting for my family to validate my choices. And they never were going to. My phone buzzed. A message from my aunt again. "Can we talk later today?" I agreed. When we met that afternoon, she didn't waste time with small talk. She looked at me and said, "There's something you should know." That sentence alone made my stomach tighten. She took a deep breath. "Your mom has always leaned on you more than the others," she said. "Not because you're the youngest or the strongest, but because you don't fight back." I felt something sink in my chest. "She's always said you're easier," my aunt continued. "More understanding. More flexible. Less dramatic." Easier. That word explained everything. I wasn't chosen because I was free. I was chosen because I was compliant. My aunt told me how, years ago, my mom used to volunteer me for things without asking, watching cousins, running errands, stepping in whenever someone was overwhelmed. She'd say, "They won't mind," my aunt said. And you never did. Because I was taught that love meant saying yes. Then she told me something that completely shifted how I saw Christmas. My sister hadn't been out of options. She could have hired help, my aunt said. She just didn't want to. My chest tightened. "She said you'd do it for free," my aunt added. "That it would be good for you." I felt sick. All that exhaustion. All that guilt. All that pressure. Because I was the cheapest option. And then came the final blow. "Your mom told her you don't really do anything anyway." I stared at her. The same sentence. The same dismissal. Repeated behind my back. Something inside me hardened, not with anger, but with understanding. This wasn't a one-time situation. This was how they saw me. Convenient. Replaceable. Available. That night, my sister texted me again. "Mom hasn't been sleeping. She's really hurt." I stared at the message. And for the first time, I didn't rush to fix it. Instead, I asked myself a question I'd never asked before. Why is her discomfort more important than my well-being? I typed back slowly. "I'm sorry she's upset. But I needed to leave." 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then she replied. "You've changed." I almost laughed. Because she was right. I had. But not in the way she thought. I hadn't become selfish. I'd become aware. Later that night, I sat alone in my apartment, replaying everything in my head, not with guilt, but with clarity. I realized something else too. They weren't angry because I left. They were afraid. Afraid that if I stopped playing my role, they'd have to face the weight they'd been shifting onto me for years. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. 6. The boundary that changed everything. For a few days after that conversation, I stayed quiet. Not because I was scared, but because I was thinking. Really thinking. For the first time in my life, I wasn't planning how to keep everyone else comfortable. I was asking myself what I needed to feel safe, respected, and whole. And the answer was simple. Distance. Not forever. Not dramatically. Just enough to breathe. I stopped responding immediately to messages. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped defending choices that didn't need permission. At first, the silence confused them. Then it annoyed them. Then it scared them. My mom called again a few days later. This time, I answered. Her voice was softer than before. Careful. Almost sweet. I've been thinking, she said. Maybe we all said things we didn't mean. I knew this tone. It wasn't accountability. It was damage control. I've been thinking too, I replied. She waited. I need some boundaries, I said. The word hung in the air. She didn't like it. Boundaries? She repeated. Between family? Yes, I said calmly. Especially with family. She sighed. So now we have rules? I didn't argue. Yes, I said again. I told her I wouldn't be available by default anymore. That I needed to be asked, not told. That my work was real. That my time mattered. Silence. Then laughter. You're being influenced by the internet, she said. This isn't you. That hurt more than yelling. Because it meant she'd rather believe I was manipulated than accept I was growing. This is me, I said. You just don't recognize me when I'm not agreeing. Her voice sharpened. So what happens when we need help? I answered without hesitation. You ask. And I decide. She didn't respond. Because for the first time, the power had shifted. A few days later, my sister texted. Mom says you're acting cold. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I replied. I'm not cold. I'm just not sacrificing myself anymore. She didn't answer. Instead, she posted another passive-aggressive quote online. Some people forget where they come from. It stung. But not enough to break me. Because I finally understood something. They were testing me. Waiting for me to feel guilty enough to come back into my old role. And for once, I didn't. A week passed. Then 2. No emergencies. No crises. Just silence. And in that silence, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. I worked better. Slept better. Thought clearer. And that's when it hit me. If my absence didn't destroy them, then my presence had never been as necessary as they claimed. One evening, my aunt called. They're adjusting, she said gently. Not happily. But they're adjusting. I smiled. That wasn't my responsibility. That night, I wrote something in my journal, a sentence I wish I'd learned earlier. Boundaries don't break families. They reveal them. 7. When they realized I was serious. It took them longer than I expected to realize I wasn't bluffing. At first, they treated my boundaries like a phase. Something I'd grow out of once the guilt settled in. They waited for me to crack, to apologize, to show up again without being asked. But days turned into weeks. And I didn't move. That's when the tone changed. My mom invited me over for dinner. Not demanded. Invited. That alone told me everything. I hesitated before accepting. Not because I was scared, but because I wanted to be sure I was strong enough to walk away again if I had to. When I arrived, the house felt different. Quieter. Controlled. Like everyone was on their best behavior. My sister was there too. She barely looked at me when I walked in. Dinner was awkward. Polite conversation. Forced smiles. Long pauses. Finally, my mom put her fork down. So, she said. Are you done being upset now? There it was. I took a slow breath. I wasn't upset, I said. I was hurt. She rolled her eyes slightly. Same thing. No, I replied calmly. One is an emotion. The other is a response to being disrespected. My sister scoffed. You're still on about that? I looked at her. Yes, I said. Because nothing changed. The air in the room grew heavy. My mom leaned back in her chair. We didn't mean to make you feel used, she said. But families help each other. I nodded. I agree, I said. But help isn't help when it's forced. My sister crossed her arms. So what? Now every little thing needs a conversation? Yes, I said. If it involves my time or energy. She shook her head. You've become difficult. That word again. Difficult. It always appears when you stop being convenient. I've become honest, I said. Silence. Then my mom said something that surprised me. You weren't like this before. I looked at her and replied, I was. I just didn't speak. Something shifted then. Not in them. In me. I wasn't trying to convince them anymore. I was stating facts. I told them how being told my life wasn't real affected me. How being volunteered without consent made me feel invisible. How I started associating family gatherings with dread instead of comfort. My sister looked away. My mom stayed quiet. For once, no one interrupted me. When I finished, my mom sighed. I guess we didn't realize it was that bad. That wasn't an apology. But it was closer than I'd ever gotten. I nodded. I'm not asking for perfection, I said. I'm asking for respect. My sister finally spoke. So what happens now? I answered honestly. Now, I show up when I want to. I help when I can. And I leave when I need to. My mom frowned. And if we don't like that? I met her gaze. Then I'll still do it. There it was. The moment they realized this wasn't temporary. This wasn't emotional. This was permanent. Dinner ended quietly. As I stood to leave, my mom said softly, "You've changed." I turned and smiled. I had to. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to explain myself any further. When I chose peace over proving myself. After that dinner, something strange happened. Nothing. No dramatic arguments. No angry calls. No emotional speeches. Just distance. And for the first time, I realized distance wasn't always punishment. Sometimes, it was protection. The family group chat went quiet. When it did buzz, the messages were neutral. Safe. Informational. No assumptions. No demands. They were careful now. Not kind. Careful. And honestly, I was okay with that. At first, the silence felt uncomfortable. I kept expecting the guilt to rush back in, the urge to explain myself, to smooth things over, to make everyone feel okay again. But it didn't. Instead, I felt lighter. I stopped rehearsing conversations in my head. Stopped anticipating emergencies that weren't mine. Stopped measuring my worth by how useful I was to everyone else. One weekend, my sister invited me to the kids' birthday party. She added one sentence. "Only if you want to." I stared at my phone for a long time. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally had a choice. I went. Not as help. Not as backup. Not as the invisible adult in the corner fixing problems. I went as a guest. And when things got loud, I stepped outside. When I got tired, I left early. No one chased me. No one guilt-tripped me. And that's when it hit me. The world didn't collapse when I stopped overgiving. The next few weeks were quiet, but in a good way. I started filling my time with things that had nothing to do with obligation. Morning walks. Cooking meals slowly. Work without interruption. Saying no without panic. And something unexpected happened. People started treating me differently. My aunt checked in regularly. A cousin messaged to say they admired how I handled things. Even my mom, slowly, carefully, started asking instead of telling. Not always. But sometimes. And that was enough. Because healing doesn't come from sudden apologies. It comes from changed behavior. One evening, I caught myself smiling for no reason. And that's when I realized something powerful. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't resentful. I wasn't trying to prove a point. I had chosen peace. And choosing peace didn't make me cold. It made me free. If this story made you realize that your life is real, your time matters, and your boundaries are valid, then don't just watch silently. Backhand index pointing right, like this video if you've ever been the easy one. Backhand index pointing right, subscribe if you're learning to choose peace over guilt. Backhand index pointing right, comment and tell me, what's one boundary you wish you had set sooner? Because sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is stop proving your worth and start protecting it.